restaurant was nearly empty when Clara set down the last of the champagne glasses on a table tucked away in the corner. It was one of those places where the lights glowed soft and golden, where the hush of wealth lingered in the air like perfume. She'd grown used to it. The expensive suits, the hushed deals spoken over dessert, the careless way some customers waved her off as though she were invisible. Tonight was no different except for the man sitting alone at table 6, Alexander Grant. Even Clara, who kept far away from business news, knew his name. The billionaire CEO whose face graced magazine covers, the man whispered about in tones of awe and fear. He sat there now in a perfectly tailored suit, his cufflinks catching the light, his presence so commanding that other diners seemed to shrink in comparison. Clara tried not to stare as she refilled his glass. She told herself he was just another customer. Rich, intimidating, untouchable. Nothing to do with her world. When the meal ended, she brought the bill, placing it carefully on the table. He barely looked at her as he reached for the pen, his hand moving in smooth, practiced strokes across the leather folder. With a flick of his wrist, he closed it and slid it back toward her. Clara smiled politely as she always did and opened it to confirm. Her smile froze. Her eyes widened. Her heart stumbled in her chest. The signature, bold, looping, unmistakable, stared back at her. It wasn't just a name. It wasn't just ink on paper. It was him. Her father. Clara's throat tightened. She blinked, convinced she was imagining things. But no, she would know that handwriting anywhere. She had seen it on birthday cards, on old report cards he signed for school. On the note he left the night he disappeared. Years had passed, but that signature was etched into her memory like a scar. And now it was here, written by this man. Her voice cracked when she spoke. "Sir, that's my dad's signature." The words seemed to hang in the air, louder than she intended. The sound of glass shattering cut through the silence as Alexander's hand jerked, knocking his wine glass to the marble floor. The sharp crash echoed across the room. Everyone turned. The waiters froze. Clara felt her cheeks burn. But Alexander didn't notice the stares. His eyes were locked on her, wide with shock, as though she had just uttered something impossible. His lips parted, his jaw tense. "What did you say?" His voice, usually commanding, was hoarse. Clara swallowed hard, her hands trembling as she held the folder. "That's my dad's signature. I'd recognize it anywhere." The billionaire CEO stared at her like he was seeing a ghost. For the first time all evening, the mask of cold control cracked, revealing something raw, something shaken. He muttered under his breath, almost to himself. "No, it can't be." The staff rushed to clean the broken glass, but Alexander waved them off, his gaze never leaving Clara. The restaurant seemed to fall into silence, the clinking of dishes and murmurs fading until all that remained was the thunder of her own heartbeat. "Sit," he said suddenly, gesturing to the chair across from him. It wasn't a request. Clara hesitated, looking around nervously. Waitresses didn't sit with billionaires. But there was something in his tone, in his eyes, an urgency that made it impossible to refuse. Slowly, she lowered herself into the chair, clutching her apron like a lifeline. Alexander leaned forward, his hands clasped, his eyes burning into hers. "Your father. What's his name?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Daniel Hayes." The name seemed to strike him like a blow. He sat back sharply, running a hand through his hair. For a long moment he said nothing, his chest rising and falling as though he were piecing together a puzzle he had tried to forget. Finally he looked at her, his expression torn between disbelief and something deeper, grief. "I knew him," he said quietly. "Your father was my partner." Clara blinked, confused. "Partner? You mean business partner?" Alexander explained, his voice low. "We started together years ago. We were building an empire. He was brilliant, loyal, my best friend. Then one night, just before the biggest deal of our lives, he disappeared. No word, no explanation. I thought..." His voice faltered, and for the first time, Clara saw vulnerability in the man the world called unshakable. "I thought he betrayed me." Her chest tightened. "No, he didn't. He left us too. My mom, me. One night he was there, and the next morning gone. No goodbye, no note. Just vanished." Her voice broke, years of buried pain spilling into every word. "I was 16. We lost everything." Alexander's jaw clenched. He looked down, fists curling on the table as memories clawed their way back. All these years, I cursed his name. I told myself he'd chosen greed or cowardice. But he left you too. He lifted his eyes, and for once the fire in them wasn't about power, it was about regret. Maybe I was wrong all this time. Clara felt the sting of tears, but she blinked them back. She had spent years pretending she was fine, building walls so no one could see the cracks. But sitting here across from the man who had once shared her father's dreams, those walls felt paper thin. Why do you sign like him? She asked suddenly, her voice trembling. Alexander stared at her, then at the signature scrawled on the bill. Slowly he exhaled. Because everything I have, this empire, this name, it started with him. When he disappeared, I carried it alone. But his signature, I never stopped writing it beside mine. Out of anger, out of loyalty, I don't even know anymore. Maybe because part of me couldn't let him go. Clara stared at the ink, her chest aching. It felt like a piece of her father had been here all along, hidden in the empire she thought was a world away from hers. The restaurant had emptied by now, leaving them alone in the dim glow of the chandeliers. Alexander's gaze softened as he looked at her, as though seeing not just the waitress who carried trays, but the daughter of the man he had once called brother. "You're his," he said quietly, almost reverently. His eyes, his fire. Clara shook her head, her voice breaking. "I don't feel like his anything. He left me, Mr. Grant. He left us with nothing." Something in Alexander shifted. He leaned forward, his tone fierce but gentle. "Listen to me. Your father may have vanished, but you're still here. And if you're his daughter, then you're family." "I don't abandon family." Her breath caught. For years she had carried the weight of abandonment, the sting of being forgotten. And here, in the most unlikely of places, the most powerful man in the city was offering her something she had long stopped believing in: connection. That night, Clara left the restaurant not as the invisible waitress she had been, but as someone whose world had collided with a past she thought was gone forever. She didn't know what would come next, whether answers, forgiveness, or something more. But she knew one thing: a single signature written in ink had rewritten her life. And Alexander Grant, the billionaire who never flinched, had dropped his glass in shock because a waitress reminded him of the one man he had never truly let go of.